Right, so this time we continue with this topic, this other topic, that is the Cold War. Just as we have just ended looking at the post-war alliances, this is also another very interesting topic because it will be like just the continuation of that previous topic. So the Cold War is another interesting topic. So let's be together as we cruise through. Now let's look at the definition. On the definition of the Cold War. So basically, when we talk of the Cold War, we refer to the difference in ideology between the USA mainly and the Soviet Union. So this one, the Cold War, involved these two countries. We talk of the USA and the Soviet Union. That's what we call Russia. So, as we have said here, that it was the difference or the conflict of ideas, ideological differences. So, USA was the country that advocated capitalism, and on the other side, communism started with the Soviet Union. So, you have the idea by this time, because just as we are looking at the post-war alliances, it was also the ideological differences, whereby the two sides, the West and the East, they did not like maybe to adopt the different or the opposite way of running the government. So we looked at those. So because this conflict between USA and Russia never engaged into an open warfare, it became to be known as the Cold War. So it was called the Cold War because it did not engage into an open warfare. It did not come up to say now there was open fire because of the Cold War. Nothing like that happened. So that's why this one is called the Cold War. So the Cold War, it was a struggle that mainly involved three things. It involved three things. Number one, it involved the propaganda. Number two, it involved economic measure. And the third one, it was the policy of non-cooperation. So propaganda, propaganda, we mentioned this term when we were looking at the outbreak of the Second World War. So during that time, we said that Adolf Hitler, he was basically to run the Nazi party. He used most of the propaganda so that people come into love with this this party, that is the Nazi party. So propaganda, we said it is the twisted truth. While economic measure, we are also going to look at it during the Cold War. During this Cold War, there was also the economic measures that were taken. For example, countries that were adopted different views like capitalism or communism, they were assisted, unlike those who did not accept the views. And also the policy of non-cooperation. On this one, we are trying to say people, they resorted not to cooperate with others. So the three things, these ones, they mainly characterized the Cold War that we are going to talk about. So at times it happens that this conflict, it turned violent, but it was not a war. It was not a war. At times this Cold War, it came to the extent of becoming maybe like it was going to spark a war, but the war did not come into existence. So that's why it is called the Cold War. Now, why did the Cold War never turn into a direct armed conflict? We have just said that the Cold War did not result into the outbreak of any war. So with that, then, we have to look at the reasons why. Firstly, It was because the USA was the only country with an atomic bomb up to 1949. And uh, with this, then, the USA did not want to use it with the memories of what happened in Japan in 1945. You remember Nagasaki and Hiroshima. You remember what happened there. So the USA did not want to use that atomic bomb, although it was at conflict with Russia. We are saying that there were two countries that were opposing, that had opposing views here, Russia and USA. So this time around, USA was the most powerful country because it possessed that atomic bomb. Therefore, it did not want to use that atomic bomb on Russia. Why? Because she had the memories of what happened during 1945, so she did not want to use the same. Now, secondly, why this Cold War did not turn into a major war was that Russia would not dare provoke USA, as it would be fatal and foolish. So Russia, on the other hand, realized that by that time, only USA could destroy Russia completely. And to do that, to provoke USA, would be to commit an error on the side of Russia. And the third one was that Russia developed its own atomic bomb by 1949. So you understand here that we have said that only USA had the atomic bomb up to 1949. But in 1949, Russia developed her own atomic bomb. So with that, then there was a balance of power to say, all right, both of them now they had the destroyer. While USA had the destroyer, Russia also had another destroyer. Therefore, they could not provoke each other, realizing that they were standing at par. So all the countries they both had the power to destroy the other one. So that war did not break out. So they both avoided that nuclear conflict, knowing how catastrophic it is. So when we talk of nuclear war, it is really catastrophic because if it breaks out, it means that it can wipe out every living thing on planet Earth. So what would be the benefit? If Russia uses the same, it means the effects can be there throughout the world, even in Russia. USA the same. If USA uses the same nuclear bomb, it means it is going to wipe out other people, including USA. So it is so catastrophic, just as it was with Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Now, let's look at the causes of the Cold War. What really caused this, the war of ideologies? So the first cause is what we have just mentioned, the ideological differences. Ideological differences was the first cause of the second, of the Cold War. So it was mainly caused by differences in ideology between the capitalist West and the communist Soviets. So we are talking of Europe here. The capitalist Europe, the Western Europe, they were believing in capitalism. Money in the hands of the people. They let the people flourish in businesses and maybe just pay the taxes to the government. And on the other side, Russia or the Soviets, they believed that no, money in the hands of the government, and the government must be doing everything that the people need. So that ideological differences. So maybe even that one to say today, if you believe that the government should be doing everything for you, it means you are somehow a communist. You believe that, all right, the government has got money, so let the government give me what I want. On the other hand, capitalists, they believe that money in the hands of the people. Let the people flourish in businesses. Let people find something to do and pay the taxes so that the government is there to make the policies and let people flourish in whatever they do. Let the people fulfill their dreams. So that is the ideological differences. So if you can look at the two ideologies, they are not really bad as to maybe what the other may think. Capitalism is very good. Communism is very good. So it depends on what people agree to do. But both ideas, they are just good and they were just good. So the West believed in capitalism and the Soviets were the communists. So that's what we are saying here. Now, why? Why did the West hate communism? Why did the West hate communism? So we are saying that there was ideological differences here. So why did the West hate communism? So the first one is that the first reason was that communists nationalized industries wherever they came to power. So you have to understand this one very well. Communist ideas, it was like the government should own everything. No private ownership of property. Each and everything, companies, factories, whatever, those businesses, big businesses, they should belong to the government and not the people. So with that then, it meant that where communism was spreading, it meant that it was taking everything, nationalizing. That's why we are saying it was nationalizing the industries wherever it was spreading. So the second reason why the West hated it was that communism removed democratic right in Eastern Europe. So there was no democracy there. So it was like the government has the say. The government is going to dictate what the people need to do at that particular moment. So the West, they hated that one. Say no, the people have got the right to democracy, to express their views. So that's why they hated communism. And the other reason was the use of the pages and terror on those not loyal to the to Moscow. To Moscow here means to the leaders of communism. So the pages, you remember Stalin and the pages, the killing of all the people who had opponent views, the pages. So those terror actions, they were not to the liking of the West. Therefore, they did not like that system of government to say anyone who is against the views of the government, then kill him. He doesn't deserve to a right to life. So that thing, the West did not like that. So that's why they hated communism. Then the second cause of the Cold War was mutual suspicion between the Soviet and the Western leadership. While the first one was the ideological differences, the second one is mutual suspicion. They are just suspicious. The Soviet, that is Russia, and the Western country, Britain, France, and the like, and USA. They were just those suspicions to say, all right, these people are doing this, it means we have to act in a different way, things like those. So the Western nations did not support Russia to suppress the aggression of Hitler. See, so here when Hitler turned on Russia during that Second World War, the West did nothing. They were just silent. They did not assist Stalin. They did not assist Russia. So with that, then Stalin, he suspected that this was a move to allow anti-communists destroy the Soviet Russia. So Joseph Stalin or Russia itself interpreted that that action of not supporting Russia during the Second World War, it was like allowing the enemies of anti-communism to destroy communism. So Stalin did not want that one. So there was that suspicion. Then we also mentioned of the Russian Civil War. The Russian Civil War, that one, it raised suspicion among the Soviet leaders. Remember 1918 to 1921? There was that Russian Civil War. So during that war, the West, we said the West, the Western countries, they assisted those people who were opponents of communism, the whites. So with that, then there was that suspicion to say, oh, these people from the West, they hate our type of government. That's why they are assisting those people who are against the government. And also, it was clear that the West was to crash, wanted to crash communism. So it was very clear that the Western, they showed that they were against communism. The Second World War strategy also, that one also raised some suspicion, basically on Russia. Number one, we are saying that Russia expected Britain and Russia to attack, Britain and USA to attack Italy first, but they did not do that. Remember, Italy, switched sides there. Italy switched sides, just as she did during the First World War. We talked about that. And the USA did not disclose to Russia the nature of the bomb to be used on Japan. That is the bomb that was thrown on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. USA did not say to Russia to say, we have the most powerful weapon that we are going to use on Japan. They did not say that. Russia just realized that there was a terrible destruction on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by your friend USA. So with that, it was like, oh, my friend used that terrible bomb there, but did not disclose anything. It means that he is keeping something behind my back. So there was that suspicion. So suspicions were also part of the causes of the Cold War. And the third cause of the Cold War, we are saying was the Stalin's policy of communist takeover. Remember, Stalin had that policy to spread now communism, take over the whole Eastern Europe, and if at all there is opportunity to take over the whole world and even the whole Europe. So the Soviet Union imposed communist government in East and Central Europe. So with those policies, remember we talked about those policies. We said Russia took over control of Poland, of Hungary, of Bulgaria, Albania, and Romania. Russia took over all those areas. So this convinced USA and Britain that the Soviets wanted to spread communism westwards or even worldwide. So that policy of communist takeover, that one made USA or the Western countries to be convinced to say, no, we have to defend ourselves against the communist takeover. And the fourth reason for the cause, or the fourth cause of the Cold War, was the American and the British hostility towards the Soviet Union. So here there are a number of factors that we are going to look at under this American hostility. Number one is that up to 1945, USA was the only possessor of the atomic bomb, and she felt threatened when the Soviets provided or developed their bomb in 1949. So they were threatened. So with that threat, it meant that they wanted to suppress the Soviet or Russia. And secondly, USA was the richest nation, and she expected to dominate the post-war affairs. So being the richest or the biggest, the strongest USA, she expected that everything that was going to happen after the Second World War, she was going to have a final say on that one and dominate like the whole world. So they were unhappy, the US, they were unhappy that the Soviet communists appeared to oppose their position. So the coming up of Russia, especially when they developed their bomb here, it meant that USA had a competitor. So with that, they wanted to suppress the competitor to say, no, we need to advance our ideas, and our ideas are the best than anything or any ideas. So that's why there was that Cold War. So the fourth one, we are saying American and the British hostility towards the Soviet Union. And also under the same, we are saying that Moscow restricted trade among her satellite or her satellite states. So this posed also a threat uh, on the economic crisis to USA, and could only be prevented if communist threat was contained. And also the Kennan report. This one, it increased the US aggressive attitude towards the Soviets. So Kennan report, this one, Kennan report, Kennan was the American diplomat in Moscow. He was an ambassador, American ambassador who was in USA. And he reported that the Soviet or Russian government was determined to spread communism, and that there was need to stop that one. So this ambassador reported to USA to say, oh, here it means, it shows that Russia is geared to take over the world by surprise by spreading communism everywhere. So we need to check on that one. So that Kennan report increased the US aggressive attitude towards the US. So the US acted by that report, the Kennan report. Now let's look at the Cold War conflicts. The Cold War conflicts. The first one that we are going to look at is the Korean War. So Japan was the one that controlled Korea since 1910. But after the fall of Japan in 1945, remember, after Japan surrendered, then what happened was that there was a roundtable conference between US and USSR, that is Russia, and they agreed to say, all right, we need to divide Korea into two zones. Mind you, we have said that this Korea, the same Korea, at first was under Japan. It was under Japan. But since Japan is now defeated, now what is happening is that they are dividing it into two. So between USA and Russia. So they divided it on or along the 38th parallel. That is the 38th degree north of the equator. That is the latitude, which is 38 degrees north of the equator. So the USA troops, what happened was that USA troops, they occupied southern Korea, and Russian troops occupied the northern Korea. Just as they agreed to say, right, Japan, the landlord of Korea, now is nowhere. We have to take over this one by dividing it into two to supervise Japan's surrender. So the reason why they did that, why they divided Korea, was that they wanted to supervise Japan's surrender. So the division itself, it was not intended to be permanent. It was not intended to be a permanent one. They said that we are going to do this one temporarily, and after that, then we are going to make a Korea as one again, no longer that division. That's why they divided it on a straight line. So the straight line was because it was just a temporary. So they need to know, all right, we have here a work to do to supervise the defeat of Japan. Now, after they agreed on the same, then what happened was that the capitalist government was established in South Korea by USA in 1948, and its capital was Seoul. Seoul was the capital city. And in the same year, the communist government again was also established in North Korea, and its capital was Pyongyang. So these governments, the other one, it was established in September in North Korea, and South Korea, it was in August. So it started in August by USA in the south, and the north followed in September in the same year, 1945. Then after that, the USA troops, they left South Korea in 1949, saying that now there is a capitalist government there. If Russia wants to take over the whole of Korea, they will not, because people in South Korea now, they have accepted the capitalist government. But look at what happened now. In June 25th June 1950, 25th June 1950, the North Korea attacked South Korea in order to unite the Korea by force. So much as we have said that the agreement was to be temporary, but then look at what is happening here. They established their governments there. In the south, they established the capitalist government. In the north, they established the communist government. And the USA goes back to USA, thinking that, everything is well and good. 1950, the North Korea attacks South Korea with an aim to unite the whole Korea. So if North Korea attacked the South, which government is going to dominate? Definitely, it is the communist government. So that's what happened there. Now, USA was not happy. USA was not happy with what happened there, with the advancement of communism. USA was not happy. And the development of the atomic bomb by USSR by 1949. So USA was not happy with that action of taking South Korea by force. So therefore, USA proposed to the UN Security Council. So here you need to understand very well. Proposed to say, right, USA or the UN Security Council has to act immediately on the action of Russia through North Korea. So she proposed that they needed to back the UN Security Council was to back the American troops in order to free South Korea from the dominance of communist North Korea or Russian dominance. So the UN forces, therefore, they were dispatched. So they were dispatched under they were deployed under the American general by the name Douglas MacArthur. So they went there under the leadership of USA, the troops, the UN troops. So here you have to understand, those who went there, they were not the American, they did not carry the American flag, but they carried the UN troops because they went there to free South Korea, because South Korea had its own government, a capitalist government initiated by USA. So remember, why did US win the support of the United Nations there? If you can connect with the self-determination policy there, then you understand it well that now USA had a backing to say no. What North Korea has done, or Russia has done through North Korea, is bad because they have infringed the rights of the people of South Korea who accepted the capitalist government. Therefore, there is need to liberate South Korea from the dominance of the opposing government, that is the communist government. But in real sense, it was the crash of what? Ideas. The one that we're talking about, the Cold War between communism and capitalism. Russia failed to veto. Remember, to veto, to oppose a proposal, a decision. Failed to veto the UN resolution. The UN resolution to say, all right, USA, you want to go to South Korea and free it, go there. Russia failed to veto because she was boycotting the meetings. As such, she failed to veto that resolution. So by July 1951, the two sides, they agreed to discuss terms of the armistice. That is North Korea and South Korea. They agreed now the terms of the armistice or the ceasefire. Then USA entered into a treaty with Korea to remain there and guard it from the communist invasion. So after the ceasefire, then USA entered into agreement with South Korea to say, no, USA has to be here so that we guard you against the communist invasion from the north. So with that then, Korea agreed. So USA provided economic aid to South Korea. Provided that economic aid to South Korea. Just as we have just looked at the post-war alliances, those economic aid that went to Turkey, it was to make those satellite states that were under communism to feel pain, to say, oh, our friends, our friends are doing good, but we are not. So this is really bad. So economic aid went to South Korea so that the people of North Korea should feel it that our people, our friends are flourishing in wealth. Now let's look at the results. What were the results of the Korean War? Results of the Korean War. Number one was that the credibility of the United Nations organization, suffered as military sanctions were mainly influenced by the West. So the decisions of the United Nations were mainly influenced by the Western countries. As a result, they suffered. The United Nations suffered credibility. So those like the communists, they started to think that the United Nations is a weapon of the West, just as it was with the League of Nations. Remember, one of the weaknesses of the League of Nations, it was taken as a tool of Britain and France to punish Germany. So with that, Germany did not respect any of the ideas of the League of Nations. So that's what happened here. With the Korean War, then the Russians or the communists, they took to it that no, this United Nations organization, it is a tool of the West. It is a tool that is just backing the Western ideas. So it was viewed as an instrument of capitalists. That's what we are emphasizing on that. Say it was opposing communism. And also the other result was that China showed herself as a world power when she prevented the unification of Korea under the capitalist influence. So we also have to look onto it that China accepted communism. It means that they were together with Russia. So being together, therefore, they were supporting the same ideas. Now, after whatever interactions or activities that happened there during the Korean War, then there was a proposal to say, all right, now let's make this Korea together as one. But that one was proposed so that maybe the capitalists, they should dominate. But China avoided that one to say no. And USA suffered a great loss on that one. So the American relations also, American relations with communist China and Russia, it worsened due to that. And not only that, millions of Koreans, both soldiers and civilians, they lost their lives because of that clash of ideas. It resulted into the Korean War, of which the war was not between the USA and Russia. The bloody war was amongst the Koreans. North Korea, the North Koreans fighting the South Koreans. As a result, soldiers, the Koreans died. Civilians, the Koreans died. No USA, not the Russians. So you can see there the consequences or the results of the Korean War. Now, let's look at another activity, another conflict of the Cold War. So we have just looked at the Korean Rising or Korean War or Korean crisis. Now let's look at the Hungarian Rising, and this one took place in 1956. In 1956. So what happened was that there were strikes, there were riots that spread throughout the capital of Hungary by the name Budapest. Budapest. So there were those rising in Hungary. So what happened was that these riots and strikes, they broke out when the prime minister by the name Imre Nagy introduced the reforms in Hungary. So what were these reforms? So on his reforms, he followed free elections, said there shall be free elections in my country, in Hungary. So he did that. And not only that, he also allowed non-communists in government. Remember, Hungary was one of the satellite states of communist satellite states. As a result, they were to follow the communism. But look at him. He allowed those people who had opposing views, non-communist, to be in his government. So with that, there were some riots there. And also he withdrew Hungary from the Warsaw Pact. Here you have to understand the Warsaw Pact that was formed as an opponent of the NATO. So he withdrew Hungary from the Warsaw Pact. That is, it was like withdrawing Hungary from communism. So that one, it sparked something to the people there, the diehards of communism. And not only that, he also asked the Soviets to remove their soldiers in Hungary. So those were the reforms that he did. As a result, that's why we are saying that there were strikes, there were riots that spread out throughout the capital city, and that was the Budapest in Hungary. So communist leaders, they were afraid that other satellites or satellite states would emulate the example of Hungary. So what they did was that they were worried that the Warsaw Pact would also break up, which would result into no defense against the NATO. We have just said that, or we know that the Warsaw Pact was formed as to counter the activities of the NATO. So with the breakup of the Warsaw Pact by what Hungary has just started, it would lead to the to no defense against the NATO. And what happened or what followed was that on 4th November 1956, then the Soviets, they sent tanks to Budapest, and they were there. They wanted to take over to suppress the rising that were there in Hungary. So by mid-November, Hungary was taken over by the Soviets. They took back, they imposed the communist government there in Hungary. So the West encouraged Hungary, but they did not help her. So the West were very happy with what was happening there with the Hungary. See, yes, there are some countries there in Eastern Europe who do not like the activities of or the communist activities. So Hungary, carry on Hungary, carry on Hungary. But it was just a word of the mouth. They did not support Hungary. Why? Because they were preoccupied with the events of the Suez Canal. Remember the Suez Canal crisis. The Suez Canal crisis. We looked at this when we were looking at some of the successes and the failures of the United Nations. So one of it was the Suez Canal crisis. Remember that one. So it was also in 1956, if you can remember that one. So the West were busy with the activities or the events of the Suez Canal. as a result, they did not take part or they did not support Hungary fully so that they redeem Hungary and make Hungary a capitalist state. So that's why we are seeing it here that Russia took over Hungary and imposed the communist government there.
Simutaya nthawi yanu kufunafuna maphunziro muzakhala wotumidwa moyo wanu wonse. Ngati simuphunzira anthu azingokutumani ajala kalime ajala kuchwe manyazi ajala katende yanti ndipo anthu ophunzira wandu wotuma so kwambiri. Ndiye ngati simuphunzira skulu akuyikirani apa mukhala otumidwa.